Hello there, and welcome to this week's edition of Conversations in Color. Again, my name is Ed Hudgins. I work with Converge Radio here in Western Wisconsin. We are so glad that you are tuning in tonight for our episode called Colorful Families. The show is brought to you by Uniting Bridges, Converge Radio, and the Pablo Center at the Confluence. And we usually would emanate from the Pablo Center, but because of our realities with this dumb virus, we're doing this thing virtually. So glad that you're listening in. Before we go any further, I want to mention three pillars of how we converse with one another on this show. Number one is humility. We come into these conversations knowing that we don't know everything there is to know about anything. And so we come in with a measure of humility, just to know that we're all still learning and growing. And hopefully we'll learn and grow through these conversations. Second is honesty. We want to lean in on the hard stuff and not shy away from it. We don't want to be afraid to deal with things that may be uncomfortable. But we just want to be honest about what's there, even if it hurts a little bit. And then lastly is humanity. We highly value the dignity of every person as a human being, as a person created in the image of God, if you will, with inherent value. And so we're going to treat people that way. Nobody will be degraded or devalued in the course of these conversations. And if we ever start walking that way, we'll pull it back really quickly. So those are things that's kind of the ethos behind this show. We want to have real, honest conversations that are going to be productive, and we believe that humility, honesty, and humanity are necessary for that to happen. Well, we have some very special guests to be on our panel here tonight. One of which we are still working to get him online here. We're having some technical difficulties, and I'll introduce him once we bring him on. But in the meantime, want to thank Rachel Pride for coming back and being with us. She was on our Being Black in the Valley episode a couple months back. She works with AmeriCorps and Blue Gold Beginnings. Rachel, thanks so much for coming back onto the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And then we have Tanya Hughes, who is a dear friend and sister of mine who I've known for a long time, and she is a counselor with the Clinic for Christian Counseling. And she was on our episode a few weeks ago talking about the importance of lament. Tanya, thanks so much for joining us on your birthday, no less.
Yes, thank you, Ed.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
21 looks great on you.
What?
21 looks great on you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
21 plus a few, but that's okay. I'll take those few and I'll keep them in my pocket. I'm happy to be here. It's a great place to spend my birthday. Such an important thing to talk about.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we're glad you're here. And then our third panelist, if we can figure out the technology, is Burl Middleton. Burl is part of the leadership of the Uniting Bridges group that Dr. Salika Ducksworth. There's Burl. There he is right there. He works with Uniting Bridges. He is the program director at the Department of Corrections. And he was the first Black city council member here in Eau Claire, which is really cool. Burl, thank you so much for joining. We're glad we were able to get this figured out.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Nice and clear.
Excellent. Thanks. I'm not a techie, but I figured it out.
We got it. And then our resident panelist for tonight. He is a professor at the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire, works in education. He is a collaborator on this Conversations in Color thing. He is my favorite South Florida bull, and I'm always envious of his extensive vocabulary. This is Dr. Rod Jones. Rod, thanks for being back.
Thank you, Ed, for having me. I'm glad to be a part of this this dialogue tonight.
All right. Well, we would be remiss to not mention the esteemed force of nature that is Adam Akava, who is joining us as always. And Adam works with CoLab here in Eau Claire. He's a part of a lot of different organizations and efforts, just a force for good in this area. I won't say anything else that'll embarrass him potentially. Adam, what are you going to be up to tonight?
So I will once again be focusing on community engagement tonight. So I'll be watching the chat here on Paragon. I'll also be scrolling over to Facebook to try to catch any comments that might be on there. So if you're joining us on Paragon, drop questions that you have in the chat. The community involvement here is the reason that we do this. We want to know what our community wants to know, and we want our panelists to be able to answer you as honestly as possible. So drop your questions in the chat. If you're on Facebook, drop them in the comment section on the Conversations in Color page, and I will try my best to watch both of those tonight.
All right. Thanks so much, Adam. Would you by chance have any kind of question to kind of get the conversation going here?
I do. So I want to think back to maybe high school or so.
That was a long time ago, dude.
For some of us, maybe, yeah. So what fashion trend that was popular when you were in high school would you want to bring back? Or do you just want to talk about and never see again?
Oh, man.
Is there an order here, Adam?
Thing anymore.
Well, I know immediately what mine would be, and that would be an afro.
You want to bring it back?
Oh yeah. But with me having one though.
I understand. I hear you. I can relate to the sentiment under that's one of the reasons I'm wearing this hat.
I say bring the MC Hammer pants back.
Right. John Skulls, yeah, those gauchos, those are bad. I'm happy that we wear high-waisted pants again. Low-rise jeans were really cool, and I don't appreciate those.
My problem is that I was in high school approximately 20 years ago, so everything that was fashionable then has come back around. But I will take the sweat, like the leggings. I'm happy they're back, so I can just wear sweatpants around town.
Yes. The first thing I thought about, Adam, was parachute pants. Because when I was in like 8th and 9th grade, parachute pants were pretty popular. And I had one pair of knockoff parachute pants and a pair of parachute shorts. I don't know that I want them back, though, just to tell you, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so I see Sheng dropped my answer there in the chat. Jinko jeans. I don't know if anybody on this call might remember them. Rachel, you probably would remember them back from when we were in school, but like the jeans with the big, gaudy, embroidered prints on them. I probably had like 5 or 6 pairs of them, and I rock those all the time. I don't like
it, but very nice. Well, thank you, Adam. Again, Adam's going to be watching the chat functions here, and we'll be checking in with him a little later in the show. Before we get started with anything else, when I introduced the 4 of you, I talked about credentials and activities that you're involved with. But for the purpose of this conversation, Colorful Families, would you each share with me why you're here for this particular show? So, Rod, would you kick us off?
Sure. Well, my situation is probably not, so unique in that, particularly here in the U.S. and abroad, families are increasingly becoming diverse, right? However we categorize that. Currently, I am married to a white woman. We have a child together. I was previously married to a black woman. And so it's a completely different set of dynamics, culturally speaking. I think that having, married a white woman, having a biracial child, and then the issues that we're having to kind of navigate, right? Conversations that my wife and I have, with and around our daughter. And so I think, what I'm learning from this experience is pivotal, right, to this conversation. And I hope that, I can share and highlight some issues that people can latch on to and learn from.
Absolutely. Rachel, how about you?
I'm here because my dad is Black and my mom is white, and I guess I'm an only child, and my mom is an only parent, which in my mind is different than a single parent. She's the only parent that I have, so it's definitely been an interesting dynamic. And I grew up here in Eau Claire, so and without that father figure to like kind of make like why I'm brown and like why my hair is so curly, like to make it make sense. I've had plenty of personal experience learning how to deal with how other people deal with my family's diversity.
Yeah.
So,
well, I appreciate that you're willing to jump in on this conversation, and we'll probably unpack a little bit of that stuff with you here tonight if we can. So,
absolutely happy to be here.
Tanya, how about you?
I am adopted internationally from South Korea. I was raised in a white family. My adoptive family is as white and Swedish as they can be. Made lefse and delivered it to the neighbors. That's how, just today, that's how white I grew up in, the family I grew up in. And then I married a 100% Dutch guy, white guy, pretty white. And we also adopted internationally from South Korea as well. So I have a kind of an interesting perspective. And I've had, like Rachel, some of those same experiences, similar experiences. How do I navigate being an Asian woman who was raised in a white family and has some of those cultural traditions of a white family? And how do I raise a Korean boy to embrace his Korean culture and understand that he's not raised in 100% Korean family?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about you, Burl? Why are you part of this conversation?
I actually moved to Eau Claire, predominantly white Eau Claire, from predominantly Black Milwaukee, with 2 biracial children. So had kind of a history in terms of what I wanted them to have in Milwaukee.
Oh, shoot. I think we just lost Burl there for a moment.
Well, I wanted to add that not only is my immediate family, like my mom is white and I'm brown, but all my her siblings have all not married non-white people. So I have 2 first cousins that are half Korean and half German and Irish. And then I have 2 cousins that are half Iranian and half German and Irish. So we have kind of an interesting melting pot going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, while we're waiting on Burl to reconnect here, I'll just kind of say why this is near and dear to my heart. My wife and I, before we were even married, we had talked about wanting to adopt internationally. I think it was one of those things where it's like, hey, we want to adopt. We know we want to adopt. Why not adopt from a place where the kid might not have as good a shot as the kids that are going to be adopted here, from here would have. And so through relationships, we got connected with an organization that was working on adoptions in Ethiopia back in 2009, I think 8, maybe late 2008 is when we started the process. And we got matched up with this beautiful boy who we met for the first time on January 25th of 2010. We adopted through Catholic Charities, and they gave you a book that was about this thick to read through in preparation as a part of your home study. And there was all kinds of things about attachment and things like that, and cultural differences. And we just, we read all the stuff. And then for the first couple of years, it was like, okay, we have this beautiful black son, and a lot of these things don't seem like they're really all that applicable right now. And then all of a sudden he started recognizing that he was black, living in a very white family in a white community. And all of those things that we read about in the Catholic Charities book all of a sudden made a lot more sense to us. And we realized we had some things we needed to wrestle through together. So Burl, we missed what you were saying.
Yeah, I don't know. My system keeps cutting out or something. I finally switched to Google, so maybe that'll be the remedy. I don't know.
Gotcha.
What I was saying basically is that moving here from Milwaukee, I had some ideas in terms of how I wanted my children raised, because in the 80s when I moved here, Milwaukee was starting to experience the drive-by shooting. So it wasn't even a racial thing. It was more of a safety issue for my children, actually.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about let's start out on a positive note, right? Because there are obviously struggles that we want to talk about together a little bit. But what is great about being a part of a multiracial, multi-ethnic family? Like, what's great about that for you all? What do you love?
Food.
The food. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my mind goes immediately.
Hey, I never would have tried Ethiopian food had it not been for my son, and now I love Ethiopian food. So I get that.
Absolutely. It's definitely the food. Now I'm hungry. Now I'm just thinking about my auntie's bulgogi, and I'm like,
Oh, now you really got me going. Now I want bulgogi. I want all these Korean
right.
foods. Rachel, you just got me going.
Yeah.
I know.
I think for me, Ed, it's about the affirmation of humanity in and of itself, right? I think when people see biracial couples or families, right? You could begin to pierce through the difference, right? That we oftentimes stereotype or cast people into. And I think being a part of a family that is biracial, right? It transcends that, right? It speaks a different narrative. It brings a different narrative to the table. Not to suggest that it's not, fraught perhaps with some intractabilities or difficulties, right? But you do force people to look at your humanity, their humanity differently, and that's what I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a real opportunity to challenge perceptions in a very personal way, I think, which is awesome.
Yeah, I want to dive into that whole idea a little bit deeper a little later tonight, the whole idea of managing perceptions and what you do with that. Because my wife especially we've got examples of, perceptions that we've noticed from others. And so, yeah, we want to take a little deeper dive into that later. What else? I mean, what else is like for me? I agree with Rachel in that, like, I loved learning about Ethiopian food and culture, and Ethiopia became. He's from the capital city of Addis Ababa, which is a big, thriving city, and it's become one of my favorite places in the world because we had to go over there to get him, and so I got to experience it. So there's that cultural thing, and then. Is it inappropriate for me to just say flavor? Like, just to have, not talking about food, but like having a son from Ethiopian heritage brings more flavor to the family. It's like we're just not so white. I mean, I don't know if there's a better, more politically correct way to say it, but that's just how I'm feeling about it,
Yeah,
I think it's.
Is Burrow talking?
I think it's appropriate because the fact of the matter is that, I feel pretty much the same way. I mean, my kids basically were not going to be black, not going to be white, but they would have an opportunity to actually, to absorb and be more eclectic and to gain everything from both cultures in terms of being, the best of both cultures. And so that's what I like to see. I mean, because of, I know what it's like being black. I've lived in white communities. I've lived in black communities. Not blacks are the same, just like not all whites are the same. So to see my kids actually develop, and to grasp onto things from other individuals, white and black, that I didn't have as a black man, but they gathered from an individual. I mean, they were like I guess more like a conduit to a culture that I'm not even aware of. So that's what I like about it, and that's what I like about it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It automatically broadens your horizons in your family. Like it's just, that's what happens automatically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything, Rob, what were you going to say?
Yeah, it automatically moves the signposts of love, right? In many ways, in many cultures, right? Endemic to our own. Oftentimes, we're told who we can and cannot love, right? You use the expression or the term flavor or flavor. I kind of, thinking about that more holistically. Flavor can be connoted as perception, right? Flavor can be connoted as, love and all these other, perhaps tangible and impalpable things, right? That we associate with humanity, one's humanity. And I think, when you see this blending, right, of colors, so to speak, right, flavors. I'm thinking about Neapolitan ice cream. Right. I mean, it suggests, right, that difference is good, right? Difference, there's love in difference. There's something to be gained, right? Through difference, and when I see families who are, biracial or what have you, right, I see the manifestation of a different type of love, right? Because we're being oftentimes told in so many ways we can't love in that way.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm with you there. I think for me, it's, if for people who watch this show much or know me, this is where my head goes. But like, I think about it in terms of how I understand concepts like the kingdom of God in the Bible, that, that it's the different cultures coming together, celebrating what's common and influencing each other where there are differences, rather than resisting the differences. I will say, when I didn't have any anticipation when we adopted my son that I would fall in love with his culture like I did. I knew I would be interested in it because I've always been interested in other cultures, but it's been an interesting dynamic. And, like whenever we go to get Ethiopian food over in the Twin Cities, I wish we had that option here, but, Claire, but whenever we would go to get Ethiopian food, it's funny because my wife and I would order Ethiopian dishes, but my son would get chicken tenders. Because his blood is Ethiopian, his DNA is Ethiopian. He's very much a Wisco kid, so kind of picky too.
Yeah, you make me think about this notion of demystification, Ed. Right?
Demystification.
Yeah, I mean, so through this process, right, of engaging in otherness, right, we demystify otherness, right? We come to know it, we come to love it.
Yeah. See the humanity in it, not just that it's other, but it's human, just like me.
That's right.
And yeah, totally. Anything else that you guys want to mention in terms of things that you love about being a part of a multiracial family? Did we hit all of the bullets? Is that all of them?
If I could just add one thing that.
Oh, go ahead, bro.
I was going to say, Ed, if it's one thing that I can add that's probably not so positive, I mean, it's one of the things that, remember I said, I look at my kids as being conduits for things that I necessarily couldn't see, even within my own culture, being raised that way. And one of those things that was fundamentally new to me was the fact of the matter that I saw racism in a different way because of how my kids were impacted by it. And they saw it in such a way that, of course, me being a black man, I mean, I look black and, I can be approached that way. My kids, on the other hand, look white. They could pass as white. They could pass as Hispanic. They could pass as a lot of different individuals. But some of the things that had taken place with them actually was new to me in terms of how they actually saw things and how they actually experienced those things and how they articulated their experiences with those things. And that was something I found it actually positive, but it's coming off of a negative spin though.
Absolutely. Well, that's a good segue right into, let's talk about what's the hard stuff. Like what's difficult about being a part of a biracial or multiracial family. And so, Burl, that's a great segue right into that question.
Good point, Burl.
Yeah. Well, then I'll just follow up with the part that is the most devastating for me is the powerlessness of being able to do something about the negatives. And, not being able to protect them. Like I said, I moved them here from Milwaukee to protect them from drive-by shootings and that type of, those types of activities. But here was a hidden danger that, what's the protection? How could I protect them?
That is, I can tell you that I can relate to that feeling of helplessness from my son. He's been called the N-word a couple of times at school. He's had, even at 3 years old, I think it was, he was told by a kid at a playground that I don't play with brown people or something like that, And, I want to protect him from that kind of stuff. And at the same time, I know that's the lay of the land, unfortunately. And so
you can't protect them. You have to equip them.
Right.
Deal with it. That's not protecting. That's not. They just would never. I would never be able to go anywhere. You know what I mean? My mom. To protect them, you don't bring them into spaces where they're obviously not going to be welcome. You know what I mean? But I have to, get a job. I have to go out into the world. I have to be, a functioning member of society. So I think for me, it was less about protection and more about being equipped with the things to say or how to react or, situations to avoid. It's more about the knowledge that you have before something happens. Rather than the protection,
Yep. Yeah, I think thank you for that. I think that's the coming from the perspective of the child who's facing it,
right.
Compared to the dad who feels helpless in the face. But part of the reason I feel helpless, honestly, Rachel, and I would lean on Rod and Burl to maybe help with this a little bit from a Black man's perspective, is as a white guy, there's a lot I still am blind to in terms of dynamics in society that I have to be aware of to really prepare my son for things. Rod was a part of an episode of Conversations in Color where we had Thurgood Dennis and Willie McCaleb, and we talked about Black masculinity. And we talked about, just the experience of a Black man in America compared to the experience of a white man. Typically, not everything is going to be. And so that's one of those things where sometimes I feel really ill-equipped to prepare my son to face those things.
I think it's a lot about, it's about being equipped. For me, it was about being equipped. And also I know that when I come home, that I'm loved no matter what I do. I'm loved and I'm cared for and I'm cherished. And you know what I'm saying? That all those, that the world is not all bad. To have that kind of a place and have that kind of relationship with my mom has been really important. When something happens, she's always turned it around. You know what I'm saying? Turned it around and been that's not your fault. To hear that it's not my fault and that's just someone else's ignorance was big for me.
Yeah, Rachel, that's a very excellent point. And I like your notion. You keep bringing us back to this notion of being equipped, right? And I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I am connecting it to what Thomas Sanford mentioned in the chat about, is it important to raise biracial kids differently, as opposed to just simply loving them, right? And teaching them the sense of equality, and to his question, and also to follow up on what Rachel is saying is, ultimately, the quintessence of it all is love, right? I mean, if your kids know unequivocally that you love them, at the end of the day, you have their backs. They can come to you and they trust, right, that you're going to be nurturing, supporting, and loving, regardless of what they experience in the world. Ultimately, right, that is going to see them through. However, there are some discourses that I think biracial kids have to be equipped with, right? To Rachel's point. Now, not to suggest that those discourses need to be foreboding, right? But yet, realistically speaking, right, that some of the issues that your kids are likely to encounter in our society, and so you try to, equip kids in ways that are productive, right? Not counterproductive, not counterintuitive, but productive to help them navigate those landmines that they will encounter inevitably, in our society. And I think that's to Rachel's point, equipping them. Right?
As I became an adult, it was more so on me. Like I felt like I had the tools, but I know that when I was younger, if something happened to me at school or, in whatever activity, it was not my responsibility as the child to advocate for myself. Mm-hmm. So I think that and my mom always came through. She always showed up. Absolutely. She showed up every single time. And, I learned to advocate for myself because she advocated for me. Mm-hmm. And it would never be like behind my back kind of a thing. It would be, we're going up there and I'm going to tell them what's what. And I'm going to be sitting right there. And, the apologies are going to be made or the lessons are going to be learned. And that's how people are going to treat you. That's how you make sure people treat you correctly. So it was about example for me. And then really, I mean, my mom would say there's no way around that. You know what I mean? Well, he's an old white guy, Rach. What do you want me to tell you? You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, sometimes it's just kind of like, well, I know, and I'm sorry. And that's not right. But, there's no way around it. But I'm here for you. You know what I'm saying? So you can't, it's to his question, raising a biracial, you kind of have to raise them a little bit differently. Because if you don't, then had I not been shown how to advocate for myself, I don't know that I would be where I am now, or I wouldn't be confident enough to even be on this panel,
Right. Mm-hmm. And Rachel, I would probably suggest, and I don't know, I haven't, been in your shoes, but I would just imagine, I can only imagine the types of experiences that you've had to deal with being a biracial child, right? In ways that even, and so, you do, there is some difference, I think that we have to acknowledge that. But love at the end of the day is the quintessence of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty.
I can accept the equipping people with the tools that are necessary. But I can tell you, as a retired military officer, I look at equipment in a much different way, and that is that, first of all, I need to make sure that my men and my women are equipped to go to war, and they need to know exactly what they're fighting for and how they're going to fight. But I also need to give them the tools on which to fight. To make the stretch, a parent is that tool. A parent is that tool that individual needs and must have. That is going to be their first line of defense for any issue. But the question then becomes, well, what are we fighting for? What am I going to equip them for? What am I equipping them for?
Right.
You're equipping.
It's something that can't be seen. It can't be seen. It can't be touched. It's philosophical. It's an abstract. But
oh shoot!
I
we
know what
lose
he was
Burl
trying to
again?
say, though. I understand what he's trying to say. It's intangible. It's an abstract idea. But at the same time, if you think about it, racism is not intangible. There are all these men, there are all these people in prison. There are all these people who don't get a job because their name is something that doesn't sound white. There are all these people, there are all of these things that racism shows up on paper all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like it is just because words are words and they're just, you know, hot breath. But at the same time, if you explain that to a child, you know, this is a real thing. People don't get jobs. People live in the projects. People don't have nothing to eat. People are going to jail over silly things. You know what I'm saying? I think that it's more of a, it is more tangible. You just have to. That's the whole point. That's what we're fighting for. We're fighting to bring that out and make it be seen.
How do you equip your child for racism, though? How do you equip them for that? To deal with
I'm saying that you're saying it's more of like an intangible thing. I'm saying there are people in prison for no reason other than the color of their skin. There are people who don't get jobs. There are people who, you know. Yeah, no, yeah, I'm not saying. I'm saying that it's. I think it is a little bit more tangible. So if you explain it in that manner, that's the problem. That's what we're going to war for. To pull those things out, say, hey, look at this. This isn't right, and this needs to stop. That's what the war is, in my mind.
I think,
but I'm misunderstanding. Racism is tangible. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
In a way, I would say.
Could it be that we're saying it's both? Really,
I think there are tangible manifestations of it. I mean, to your point, Burl, is that yes, they are perceptual. They are philosophical. They are, you know, intangible, so to speak, right? But when you look at the manifestations of those things structurally, right? How does one's belief, right? The enactment of one's belief lead to these, you know, systems of oppression, systems of inequality, you know, so those beliefs, right, shape those, you know. So I get where you're coming from, you know, Burl. I mean, I agree 100%, but there is a tangible element, right, to the way that we engage in our philosophical belief.
Yeah, and I understand that, but when we talk about children don't understand abstracts. And racism is at that level, at that age, an abstract. They don't see those things. They don't understand. They don't comprehend those things. They don't know why mom can't, you know, go to the front of the line and all these kind of things. You know, they don't quite understand those things.
I would agree.
So yeah,
I would agree that they cannot discursively. They cannot oftentimes put them into precise or, you know, specific words, but they know it doesn't feel right. You know, and it's that sneaky, that perfidious feeling that they have, right? That suggests that I'm being treated this way because I'm different somehow, right? They may not be able to articulate that, but I can tell you, kids at a very young age know that this ain't right, right? I'm different than this person. And so I'm treated this way because I'm different. You know, I think they don't have the lexicon to articulate.
I think it's about teaching them to be aware of what that feeling means. What is that wrong feeling? What is that in me that doesn't feel right? And then helping them come up with the tangible ways to stand up to it. So it's really being aware of, it's the both and.
I think that my mom, I would get stared at. My mom would always be like, they're just staring because you're pretty. They're staring because you're beautiful. You know what I'm saying? You just take the time, just redirect, you know, distract, redirect until it's time to really have the conversation and they can really understand, you know, the systematic oppression. I think you kind of just have to be building up and redirect until you can get that far.
I think you can build up, but there's an important part, and there's importance to being honest too, because if we always redirect, we never are honest with our kids, then what is this new thing you're bringing up, Mom? Where has this been? I mean, for me, that's part of my journey. Growing up in a white family with very white parents who adopted me without thinking love was enough, but not thinking about how race played into that love.
Right.
Like that makes a big difference. So I wasn't equipped. And so all of a sudden at 20, racism hit me in the face.
Right.
like a brick. And I don't, we don't want our kids to get to 20 and be discovering what racism is. That's not equipping them.
I mean, you're right. I think that there's probably a certain age for every kid where it's appropriate to start to have those kinds of conversations. My daddy's from Mississippi, so it was like that. It wasn't ever really like a conversation. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it was that's just what it was. Then it was just kind of a thing. I don't think there was one real big conversation, but I mean, maybe that's what's necessary for other kids, and it's up to the parent to decide when to do that and when it's appropriate and to not be late.
There's some good discussion going on in the chat. I don't know, or maybe Adam or Ed, one of you guys could pull that in. Some good questions over there.
Yeah, I wanted to just real quickly, and then we can do that. But as I've watched my son grow and develop over the years, as a white dad observing the development of a young black man, I have seen him go from a little bit of what Burl was talking about, as a 2-year-old, for example, where he could not have articulated what was happening to him. Maybe he couldn't even have interpreted it. But then watching that development, because he's a very insightful, perceptive boy, and to watch him start putting 2 and 2 together, and we would guide him through it too, like we're aware of things, but it's like at some point a switch was flipped where it was like he got, and it wasn't, I mean, we're talking about 5 years old maybe. It wasn't like last year, where he started to really put 2 and 2 together. And then when you throw into that what we see on the news, some of the stuff Rachel was referring to earlier, the data that's out there, about incarceration, and then you see George Floyd get killed on TV, basically, things like that. He starts asking questions, and then it's just, we're gonna sensitively and developmentally appropriate level, we're gonna talk to him about it and walk him through it and try to help him understand. This is what you're up against. I'm sorry, but like this is honestly, this is what you're up against, and we're right here with you through it, and we'll bear the burden with you in any way we can. But like at the end of the day, this is really the lay of the land, and as much as that stinks. Adam, hey, you're here. So Adam, I'm going to take before we get into the community stuff. I want to mention real quickly here, if you've just tuned in the last little bit here, this is Conversations in Color. We're talking about colorful families, so biracial, multi-ethnic families that have been impacted perhaps by biracial, multiracial adoption, those kinds of dynamics. And I want to reintroduce these incredible panelists. This discussion has been so rich already. We've got Rachel Pride, who is a second timer here with us on the show. We've got Tanya Hughes, who is also a second timer here with us on the show. Burl Middleton, this is his debut, his premiere, if you will. And Dr. Rod Jones joining us as well. And then we've got back on the wheels of steel, Mr. Adam Akava, who is watching our chat function here. Adam, you want to talk a little bit about how people can be engaged in the conversation?
Yeah, sure thing. So if you are looking to ask questions to our panelists tonight or have anything to get involved with in this conversation, be sure to add your questions in the chat on the right-hand side of the Paragon platform here. Or if you're joining us on Facebook, you can drop your comments in the comments section below the video. So I'll be watching both of those tonight. And Ed, we've had a lot of questions tonight. One thing that is kind of a common theme is something that we've heard about, even as far as the national stage in the last presidential debate, of the talk. This is a talk for not only biracial families, but families with children of color, in just recognizing that some of the discrimination and some of the things that they face in public life may be because of the color of their skin. So as far as biracial families go, when when did you have that conversation, or when do you feel it's an appropriate time to have that conversation with your children? Because it's definitely a little bit more difficult navigating it when they see one parent maybe not being treated the same way as a different parent in different situations. So I think as biracial families, that can be almost even more difficult to navigate. I definitely don't want to put a qualifier on that, but I'd be curious to know about our panelists' insights on that.
Yeah, I want to defer to others. I mean, I've got my own take on that, but I really want to hear from Rod and Tanya and Rachel. When did you first start having some conversations like that? Burl, tell me what your stories on this.
Probably pretty early. I stayed up too late watching NYPD Blue with my mom. You know what I mean? I'm an only child, so like I was spoiled and we were super close. So I was the kind of kid that asked a lot of questions. Like, I think all kids ask a lot of questions, but I was the kind of kid that asked a lot of questions. And my mom was the kind of mom that gave big, long answers. My grandma used to say, my mom's mom used to say, why are you telling her all that? She don't even know all that. You know what I mean? Like, you're giving her this long answer. She doesn't understand what you're saying. And my mom would be like, yes, she does. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. So it was just early that was the kind of relationship that we had. I guess I just knew that I knew the difference between brown and white. You know what I mean? But I don't know that I necessarily I think it was more of a conversation of like, if anybody says anything to you, if anybody says like these words, like these things, or this happens, you need to call me immediately. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'll take care of it. So that's the first time that I realized, probably elementary school, early, that I realized like, maybe something's going on here. You know what I'm saying? Maybe this is an issue. This is brown skin, white skin. You know what I'm saying? Made the connection. I started school in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and there was one other girl whose mom, she's mixed also. Her mom is she's African American, like actually African American. Her mom's from Benin. And we were the only two Black girls in class. So, and that was kindergarten on the first day. And we're still friends to this day. But, you realize early. So what are you in kindergarten, 5 or 6? You realize like you make a connection early. I think. Not necessarily that like, you don't get the whole idea. I think it just comes gradually after you make the first connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the benefits that we had early on with our son is I've always been drawn to other cultures, and so like I was talking about earlier, I was excited about his Ethiopianness, if you will, and just celebrating that with him. And so we made a point to do that with him, but also knowing that since we're living in Western Wisconsin, people who see him won't see him as an Ethiopian child; they'll see him as a Black child, and so. I think, though, that having that awareness of his heritage and celebrating that with him when he was really young set the stage for us to be able to have conversations with him about, like being a Black child in a white family in a really white community and what that could potentially mean for his day-to-day experience. So I think we started having specific conversations about race with him probably when he was 6 or 7. Before that, we were kind of setting the stage, not really wittingly doing that, but setting the stage for that conversation by just recognizing our cultural differences and kind of celebrating that together, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, I think we shouldn't delude ourselves, right, into thinking that, we don't see difference, right? I mean, it's in your face.
Mm-hmm.
Kids see difference too, and they know how difference feel, right? They may not be able to articulate it as well as we can, but they feel it, right? And so, you know, my daughter, she's 3, but she's quite inquisitive. She asks a lot of questions, Rachel. She asks a lot of questions, and I can imagine it will probably be early elementary that her mother and I will have to engage her in some pretty serious yet soft conversations around these issues, right? I can see it already emerging, and she's only 3. Certain conversations, certain ways that she engages in dialogue with her mother and I, having attended school for a day or what have you, and things don't go right or things the way you can kind of tell, right? She doesn't know how to articulate it, but you can tell. And so I think, you know, I'm kind of thinking that it's probably going to happen with her early elementary, given her maturational rate.
I think it was questions about hair. That's really where I guess I'll just make sure.
Yeah, already with my daughter. Yeah, good point, Rachel.
So my mom, that's my mom, me and my big forehead as baby. Now, leave me alone. Don't come for me. But you know, my mom's hair was like, how come we gotta do my hair and we don't gotta do your hair? How come I can't do your hair and you gotta do my hair? You know what I mean? How come my hair doesn't do what your hair does? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like those kinds of things. Like, well, wait a minute now. You know what I'm saying? They're like just things like that. Hair was like the biggest.
Oh my God, Rachel.
Oh my goodness. I was like, how come my hair won't just fall down? I just want it to fall down like a white girl. How come we have to do that? I understand. Make it make sense. Like I was actually livid. I was so furious. I was like, well, and the first time she straightened my hair, she didn't like flat iron it. She blew it dry. So it was still poofy. It didn't look silky and fall down like your hair, Tanya. Like it did not fall down like that. And I was like, this is not what I wanted. Like, why won't? Then my mom had to. I remember this conversation. She was like, "It's never, ever going to do that. It's never, ever going to do that, ever."
Hey, bro, you gotta appreciate that, man. It's like going to war, bro. That hair thing is like going to war, brother.
Hey.
Yeah, I attributed my loss to one time. Trying to make it fall.
Yeah,
and then it fell out.
See, you did too much. You play too much.
It was the chemicals.
Yeah. Exactly.
Tanya, you said. Tanya, you were talking earlier about your parents kind of being unaware of the cultural pieces and preparing you for, you know, things you might face. How have you handled that with your son?
I definitely have had several conversations with him along the way, especially so he's 8, but I remember distinctly 4 years ago, almost to the day, having a discussion on if people say anything about your race, going back to where you came from, any of these conversations, if they call you the virus, you tell me, and I will call them. I will call school so fast. You will not even know. I mean, we have very direct conversations because I don't want him to be 21 and be like, Mom, what does that word mean? Because I don't think it was right like it was for me.
Tanya,
so we started at 4.
I mean, do you think your experiences, Tanya, shaped your activism?
Yeah, yes. I mean, because my activism and passion haven't come until I've been an adult. But I definitely work with kids in transracial adoptions, helping equip parents to educate their kids, to walk alongside their kids. So yeah, it probably has shaped it more than I realize. Because I don't want kids to be where I was.
Burl, how about you? When did you start having conversations about race with your children?
It was probably when they were probably about 7 or 8. you know.
Man, every time he starts talking, we lose him.
I know, right? It's so sad.
I was gonna say my mom really inserted herself when I was in elementary school. She was like PTA president or whatever it was, PTO or PTA or whatever the team of parents that. Right. I don't know what they do now. I don't know, but she was always like in there so that when they were planning things, like, well, you know, I'm sure that there were conversations like, okay, yeah, that sounds great, but like, did you consider that? Like, my kid's brown, you know what I mean? Like, you know, don't say that or like whatever. It wasn't necessarily conversations with me, more as it was like advocating behind the scenes until it got to the point. It was just kind of a gradual thing.
Yeah, I can tell you as a white parent of a black child, and even the adoptive aspect of it, when there be certain school projects and such that have come up for my son, that get into like family tree and heritage and stuff like that, it's like those have been some fairly painful moments where, you know, he's like, he just doesn't want to even deal with that, and you know, it's just hard stuff. And it's something that, you know, if you're white parents with white kids, you're never going to have to probably worry about those kinds of things. But you throw in the race dynamics and the adoption dynamics on top of it, and it's like, you know, some of those school projects are like minefields, and it's really hard to prepare your kid because you don't know everywhere the teacher's going to take them in a class, you know, in a given class. So
yeah, I think that my mom really, like, when I went to school, well, okay, so I'm my mom's only, and it's just me and her, so she was very, very protective. Not that I was necessarily sheltered, but she was really protective. Like, she had like a 2-hour meeting with my kindergarten teacher before she let me go to kindergarten. Like, leave that woman alone, man. Like, leave her alone. One of my favorite teachers.
I love that.
Yeah, she was like not playing any games at all. Like, no games at all. And so, yeah, I just think that those are the kinds of questions that, you know, parents or guardians need to ask. So what kind of projects are you guys going to be doing? Are you being racially sensitive? You know what I'm saying? At parent-teacher conferences, making sure that those things are happening, so that we're not getting an ancestry DNA project sent home, and now we have to revisit the fact that, you know, we're family, but we're not, you know, blood family.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I can't think of a reason why a teacher couldn't make up some new kind of project that didn't have to include that to get their point across. Find a new way.
Yeah. So you need to be on the school board, obviously, when that time comes.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about going to school for education administration.
Adam, I see you hanging out there. I'm guessing you got another question or two for us.
Yeah. So I know this panel is on biracial parenting, but there are generally more people involved than just the kids in biracial parenting. So how do you support your partner? Or for Rachel, how did you see your parents supporting one another in this conversation, if at all? And if not at all, like, there's nothing wrong with that because we all come from different situations. But if you can offer support to your partner, how does that happen?
It's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I can speak. I'll just get it rolling here a little bit. Then I want to hear from you all. But I will say, when Josh was a baby, my wife, would take him, you know, like into government office buildings or whatever. At the time, we were needing assistance from the government, so we were on WIC, and she would go in and she would have people staring at her, and what she felt from them was some of the stereotypes about a white woman having a black child. And you know, and it was like, I don't know how I can't speak to how I supported her, but I can say definitively that support was needed, in those instances like that. So, but I'd love to hear from you all, like, what,
absolutely.
like,
I would say, Ed, one of the advantages, my wife is also a professor as well. And we have some pretty, to borrow Burrell's word earlier, some pretty significant philosophical conversations as professors. And one of the advantages, right, of that is that we just give it to each other just on the straight and narrow. I mean, we dive in. And so how I support her is just kind of over the years, it's just letting her know some of the things she can come to anticipate and expect, right? I just kind of remember one of the things that, when I said it to her, she didn't really understand it. I said, well, babe, you have to understand that there's a black tax. She was like, what's that? I said, well, there's certain things that you're going to want to buy for our child. You're going to pay more for. You're going to pay more for it. What do you mean? Well, for example, getting her hair done, right? Finding certain toys that she like, right? So different things that are not readily available. Is that mom or grandmom or?
This is my mom. Wow, it's my mama.
I didn't know. I know you thought okay, mom. And so that's one of the things that we kind of have those conversations, right? Some of them are natural, some of them are just kind of situational. But when we have things that emerge in our lives, we just dive in, right? And in some instances, we're just on a straight and narrow. In some instances, she needs those words of encouragement and support, and you have to know, when those times are, when they require, right, those words of encouragement and support. Also, there's the other times when you just have to say, hey, and I'm hearing from other panelists, it is what it is, right? And so, and it's not to diminish, right, her experiences or anything versus mine, but it's one of unison, helping each other work through, right, these barriers, engage in these very thorny, complex conversations and externalities, that are manifest in society.
I think that we work together a lot. No, I'm not mute.
No,
she's hard to mute.
Ain't no mute button on me. So like you were talking about with hair, I think that I knew what I wanted, and you could help me figure out what questions to ask the stylist. And I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted her to talk to him, make sure that all the bases were covered, and we make 17 calls around town. I finally found there's one lady, Claire, that I let cut my hair. There's one lady, otherwise I cut it myself or I let her do it. We don't play on games with that.
And I know I'm getting in late on this, and I haven't been in on the beginning, but I want to say that I know I made a lot of mistakes because I can only act from my own experience. And times when I couldn't hear Rachel's voice because it wasn't my experience. And I've apologized, and she's forgiven me, I think, for much of that. I also worked hard to keep my eyes and ears open to her and to her experience and to her feelings and concerns, because they were foreign to me in many times. We're fortunate to live in a multiracial, multicultural place for the first 5 years of her life, and then moved into a more white, more rural community, and then to Eau Claire. And so those opportunities became less available, but we still seek them and had sought them. Her dad wasn't available after she was 2, but we still had a community of people around us, which was a lot of support for me and for her as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There were challenges that her dad and I talked about ahead of time, and there were things that were unexpected. And I suspect that's true of any parent, right? But I think that it's more complex for us than maybe in other
well,
families.
good job, Mom. You've done a good job.
Yeah.
She seems like she can hold her own. So you've done a good job. So
that was
congratulations.
That was important because there are things she'll face that I'll never face, and she needs to be able to do that.
I told him how you this is out of like 2 hours.
Yes, I did. My baby's going to school, and you better treat her well. What do you know about her? What do you know about 5-year-old black girls?
I love it so much. But that's advocating, right? That's fighting for your child. I love that. I love it so much. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to pop on.
Thank you.
Added bonus there.
It's okay.
I was working with another group on an anti-racist and equity statement for another group I work with. So thank you for letting me sneak in.
Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Tanya, I'm curious, I know you and your husband, and I know a little bit about kind of the supportive nature of that relationship, but like, as you guys are navigating things with your son, you're navigating your own things. What has that relationship been like in terms of support?
I mean, I think he's super supportive. He's like fabulous listener. He's just does his, let me do my thing is what he says. You do your thing, you know. And so that's been great. But I think there'll be times when he doesn't understand what's going on or why I'm having a conversation. And then it's a dialogue. And sometimes there's a push back and forth. No, but here's really why I'm doing it, because I want him to be equipped to go forward. And here's why. Well, do you think he's done hearing those statements? No, I think we're going to keep, when he tells me to be quiet and I've said enough, I'll keep talking. And then he'll tell me to be quiet. And then we'll keep going, because I want him to be ready.
I like that.
I remember when we had the first big march after the George Floyd incident, and Tanya and I had met at Phoenix Park for the first, as we were getting ready to start walking, and one of the things I remember is you said that you said something about your husband was like, where are you going?
I remember.
And you said something to the effect of, don't you know me? Or don't you know who I am?
Yep. He's like, oh, no, it was, he's like, oh, she's just going to do her thing. She's going to go. Oh, no, that's what he said. He said to me, I said, I'm going to go to this march. And I thought he'd say, don't do that. What are you doing? He's like, no, just go. You're going to go. So just go. Like, I know you're going to do it. So let's talk about how you're going to do it. Go with Ed, because you've never done something like that. And he's a big guy. He'll keep you safe. He's white and he's a big guy. But go.
My primary function in marches like that is to be big and white.
It helps, Ed. Every little big thing helps, brother.
That's right.
I say that a lot. Like when people ask me, like, what can I do to be a part of the movement? And I'm like, you can just be white and be just stand over here on our side, but just shh. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what it is. Like those kind of things. That's the function.
Yeah. Well, and truly, I mean, one of the things we've talked about, and this is something we haven't had a chance to really get into, and we probably won't be able to get into a great amount tonight because it's already 8:44. That's what happens with this. And I'm not surprised that tonight feels like it's flying by even faster because we're talking about stuff that's highly personal that we're living through at different levels every day. But I think about one of the ways that white folks like me can really help is to be a bridge to other white folks, that may see or think about things a little differently. And one of the reason I bring that up now is because with my son, I'm originally from Virginia. I still support the University of Virginia Cavaliers, my favorite squad, but I was raised around racists. I mean, those racism was around me all the time. It's a different flavor of racism than what you have in Eau Claire, but it was there. The heart of the Confederacy. And so I had to learn early on what kind of boundaries I needed to set up with my family members to protect my son. And honestly, Rachel, to your point earlier about equipping, that's a hard thing to do when you're talking about family members. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you equip your son to, like, because I don't even want him to hear that junk from like people that should be loving him, And thankfully, I'm not in a situation where I have to worry about that. Thankfully, I was able to have conversations with some of the people that I may have thought I needed to be concerned about, and they've been very respectful of my wishes on that. But that's I think, where white folks like me, whether it's, I think the bigger point is whether you're talking about protecting your own child or setting boundaries around your own child. Or in your guys' case, I'm looking at the other parents in the group. So Rod, Tanya, and Burl, like, what do you do, if you've got family members who might have things to say about the biracial nature of your family, or the multi-ethnic nature of your family? Like, what do you do with that when you encounter that?
Well, I think a big part of it is your personality, right? And your willingness to engage your family members, right? In certain ways. With me, I have no problem. No problem at all. Right? So and I think knowing my family, knowing me in that way, even if they thought it, they know to keep it to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think, it kind of goes back to what Burl was saying a bit earlier, right? You become the tool. You become the arrowhead on that spear, right? That's going to protect and or inflict some damage.
I think my mom just kept me away from her.
When you talking about my kid, man, hey, it's home. right? It's on. So I think, you have to be willing, right, to tell your parents, right, here is the line of demarcation. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if you cross this line of demarcation, this is what you can expect.
Yeah.
I'm gonna stop there, Earl, because I'm using some military terminology here, man. I'm gonna let you take over, bro.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, it is one of those things where you got to be a beast. That's all.
Yeah. I will say I had family members who I had to, when some of these attitudes became prevalent, I had to just cut them out for several years. And then when they wanted to re-engage, I had a video meeting actually, I didn't have a video. I had made a video for them and said, you need to watch this. And before we'll even consider reconnecting, you got to hear this and you got to know what the ground rules are going to be going into this. And we didn't really talk. We talked sporadically for about 8 years. Mm-hmm. I mean, very sporadically. And we would go for months and months without talking. And now we've been talking for about 1.5 years, and it's been good. I mean, we were reconnected and trust is getting rebuilt, and they have respected the boundaries. And I think we've even gone a little further than that, which has been really cool. Like, it's not just about respecting the boundaries, but trying to help them get some actual perspective on things that they didn't have before, which has been good. So
I like that. I like that approach, Ed. I mean, because everybody, like I say, it's a personality thing, man. Everybody handles these situations entirely differently, right? I mean, and And I think that approach is a sensible one, right? And it allowed you guys to kind of step back, right? And go into a timeout, if you will, right? And then engage in a way that was productive. And I think you figured that out. And I think you navigated that, brilliantly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was definitely hard. I mean, it wasn't like these were distant cousins or anything. These people that I've been very close to. So anyway. Yeah, so I would say that's in for me. And again, my situation amongst this group is unique in that, I'm the white parent of a black son. And we have, both of us are white. My wife and I are both white. And so our experiences are fundamentally different than Rachel as the child of a white mom and Burl as the black dad of, biracial children. And so we've all got different challenges between us here. But I would imagine at some level we all have the issues with either family members or family friends that, if there's going to be a family get together and that person's going to show up, there's potential for something stupid to be said.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it goes to Adam's point about microaggressions over in the chat. I think that's a very important concept, right? And how family members can engage in these, these microaggressions in ways that are very specious, right? In ways that are very, meant to be clandestine, right? You know what they're doing. Your kids may not know what they're doing, but you know what they're doing. Right, and I think the way that Adam positioned that in the chat is well said.
From family members too, you get the I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about, but that doesn't negate the fact that they are being aggressive.
Right,
and it's not okay. but it's not you. So
right. So I have a great example of that. So
that's good, Adam.
With the family members I'm talking about right now, when my son was not even a year old. No, he was a year old. He was just a little over a year. And he was visiting them. We were visiting them as a family. And one of them made a comment about I think it was a black woman in another car. We were in the car together and talked about how she was being African American, and they meant it in a derogatory sense. I don't know, but it was obvious to be they were doing that. I said, well, you realize that he is African American, right? And they were like, no, we be like African American. And I said, no, by definition, my son is African American, and it's like, come on now. It's that whole, I'm not talking about him, but yet you are actually talking precisely about him in the words that you are using.
Right.
I get fired up about it now talking about it.
Yeah, I can tell you're getting a little upset. You're like, I don't know. I knew what you meant. See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I hopped in on my mom's whatever meeting she was doing. So it's kind of funny. She just came down the hall and hopped on mine. But I was saying, you can tell. We know. You know what I'm saying? I was like, somebody asked, it was a Hispanic woman on there, and she was like, do you want to tell white people about your experiences? What do they say? And I feel like a lot of them are like, no, it's not a real thing. You're tripping, basically, is what they try to tell me. And I'm not tripping because I saw it in your eyes. And you're not gonna tell me that I'm just tripping out. No. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure you were right, Ed. I'm sure she was trying to be mean.
Oh, yeah. Racist at the very least, which is, mean. So
mean, right. Why you gotta be so mean? I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. Let me just throw that out there.
Now, Rachel, you're just full of pride.
You know what? Pride.
Oh my gosh. I feel like this conversation, one of the things that I love about this particular episode, and all of the shows we've done have had different flavors of why they were meaningful to me. What's meaningful to me is I feel like I'm sitting in a small group of people trying to figure stuff out together. Tonight it's a little different, like people who have some common experience, but from different angles. And it's therapeutic for me. And so, we're getting close to 9 o'clock. I want to just make sure I express to you all how thankful I am that you have spent this time. Aside from everybody that's tuned in, aside from the questions from our community, which have been great, personally, I'm very thankful for this conversation with you all. It's been very meaningful to me. I want to, as we draw to a close, I'll close out the show like officially here in a couple minutes, but I would, if we could just go around, and if there's one thing you would like our listeners, our viewers to know about your experience in a biracial family, what would that thing be? And it can be for any reason. You just want them to know it because it's great. You want them to know it because you want them to be sensitive to people who are from a similar family background or whatever. What's one thing that you want everybody to know? And Rod, I'd kick it off with you if I could here.
I like what Randy said in the chat, and he mentioned about this idea of just treating everybody with respect, fostering, good relationships with other people, and earlier in my opening statement, I talked about affirming each other's humanity, right? And so for me, that being a part of a biracial family or a multicultural family, right? I see myself as being a beacon, right? For that belief, so to speak, right? I see that other people can look at my family, right? And know that, difference can be celebrated, right? However we define difference, right? And so I would like my listeners to know, or our listeners to know, that at the bottom line, we're all humans and we all love the same.
And they can be your listeners, Rod. We're just going to say that this is your audience tonight. It's all about you tonight, man.
No, I don't think so, but thank you.
Tanya, how about you?
I think it's easy to look at somebody who's different from you, or a family who's different from you, and make judgments or judgments in your mind. And I think there's a beauty in curiosity. Mm-hmm. And so if there's something that looks different and you don't understand, ask questions. Come from a place of curiosity, not from a place of judgment. Mm-hmm. And you never know what you're going to discover about yourself, about the other person, other people. Come from a place of curiosity.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I love it a lot.
Burl, how about you? Well, what's one thing you want everybody to know?
Well, I think that it's really important to know, because I even see this with other Black folks in town, and that is that it's almost like they're afraid to speak because they feel like either one, they don't belong. That's the sense that I get. But when you stare at a family because they are multiracial, it's uncomfortable for the family, first of all. So if you have a question, I think it's okay to go and ask. And that's one thing that I would say, rather than stare and let people think that something's really bad that you're thinking, ask a question such as, hey, how old are your children, or whatever, to start the conversation going, because you really want to know something a little bit more, intriguing than just how old they are. Mm-hmm. But the parents will pick that up, and they will take it from there. If it's awkward for you, start the conversation. They'll take it over because they have more experience.
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Build a bridge. Rachel, how about you?
At the risk of being corny, I'm going to say this. Don't let anybody tell you who you are. You know what I mean? You get to choose who you are. You might not get to choose the color of your skin, but you get to choose who you are. So don't, as a biracial kid, I get to pick, and y'all not going to tell me anything different. And find out who's going to go to bat for you, and you keep them on your team. You always will advocate for yourself. Don't let nobody tell you nothing that ain't right. If you know it's wrong, then it's wrong, and that's okay. And if you need somebody, hit me up on Facebook, because I will go to bat for y'all. If you need support,
I need to know your stylist, Rachel.
Huh?
I need to know your stylist. Your person does your hair.
Oh, do you? I got a couple
I'll be in contact with you, Rachel.
Yeah. Don't let anybody tell you who you are, and if you need help, reach out for it. That's what I'm trying to say.
That's what's
well. I want to say in regard to Rachel that we are just beginning to see the impact that this woman's going to have on the world. So I want to tell you all again how much I appreciate you being here and being part of this. Want to also say thank you to the Pablo Center, Uniting Bridges, and Converge Radio for partnering with us in this effort. If you missed any of our previous episodes, we're on YouTube, so you can go to the Pablo Center's YouTube site, and there's a playlist for Conversations in Color in there. Check that out. Next week, we're going to be talking about bells, candles, and faith. We're talking about holiday celebrations in all their varieties, and how to celebrate those things, how to respect other people's celebrations, that kind of thing. We're going to have Dr. Cheryl Jimenez Fry from the university rejoining us, as well as Amy Renshaw, who is part of the local Baha'i community here in Eau Claire, and Dr. Salika Ducksworth-Lawton will be rejoining us next week. Please join us on December 21st, next Monday, for Bells, Candles, and Faith. And once again, thank you for joining us tonight. Peace to you all.